After what has felt like 3,000 years, AZ's Floette is finally back. Holy crap, it's been forever since any signs of this Pokemon has evolved. Guys, my name's Yuki the Geekimist, and today we're going to have a very long discussion about the history behind AZ's Floette, why we should have had this thing literally back in 20... Oh my god, Pokemon X and Y is that old? Holy crap. Yeah, we should have had this thing years ago. Talking about AZ's Floette means talking about canceled Pokemon games, canceled events, things that we don't think happen, patches done by a company who we already know has a few issues, and just the fact that we as a Pokemon fan base are insane. So today, guys, this is the way too long where is AZ's Floette, and will we get it in Pokemon ZA? First of all, to even get into this, we have to talk about Pokemon X and Y. Pokemon X and Y's main story involved talking about meeting a man named, well, AZ. AZ is a ancient king from long ago whose Floette went off to fight the Great Pokemon War. And unfortunately, AZ's Floette during the war died because it's a Floette. I'm sorry, AZ, man. You sent a Floette off to fight. It looks cool, but you sent a Floette off to fight a war. That's kind of on you, man. You kind of did that yourself. Well, after he then built the ultimate weapon, a weapon that was basically a giant tower, and he was with the intention on using Pokemon Life Force to revive his Floette, and he did. And well, let's be honest. It was successful. But the Floette was horrified by what it did, and instead of staying with him, he left. Pokemon X and Y's main story goes on. AZ is caught, and we learn about his history by Team Flare. And then at the end of the story, after we beat the Champion League and we're getting rewarded for saving the region, out of nowhere, AZ shows up during basically the end credits scene to have a Pokemon battle with. And I still love this. I wish more Pokemon games had this kind of post-credit battle. They really did that in Generation 6. You had that, and then you had the battle with May or Brendan. I think Brendan's his name in Gen 3. But then we have a major... Yeah, we have a battle with AZ. And after the battle where he's finally like, I'm ready to live my life again... Out of nowhere, AZ's Floette flies down from the sky and comes back. And we have the... Sorry, I've teared up a little bit. I always cry when I see AZ's Floette come out of thing, because... Holy shit, that scene gets me every time. So, if that's where the story ended, and this Pokemon was just designed for a cutscene, we'd be done. There would be nothing more to discuss. We could walk away, and we'd be done. But we have a problem. That's not where the story ended. Within the data of Pokemon X and Y, there was a bit more to this AZ's Floette behind the underneath the data. First of all, AZ's Floette couldn't evolve, which isn't particularly weird, but every Floette in the time was designed to evolve. Another thing too is it had a custom shiny model, much different than any other, model. And then it had a very interesting thing, because you need to understand that, give you a second. Then it had a custom move called the Light of Ruin, a custom fairy move with recoil damage. This move has never shown up on another Pokemon since then, and has never appeared officially within the games. That leaving AZ's Floette as a very particular Pokemon, custom model. Also, if you don't know the coding of how Pokemon works, every Pokemon has a form. Not base and shiny, but a form. For example, Pikachu has a form, which is just Pikachu. And also, then there's Pokemon such as, let's pick up one from Generation 6, Vivillon has technically 20 forms. So the base form would be 0, and then like the Pokeball form would be 20. or 19, sorry, 19. Floette has this as well. Floette has 0, 1, 2, 3, 4 for the 5 different colors of Floettes. But in Generation 6, there's a sixth form, which is the Floette for the Pokemon here. And that means that technically there's a bit more underneath the surface. That means technically if you went in and modded Pokemon X and Y, you could change a regular Floette into this AZ's Floette look. And it would be locked to not evolving. And if you hack in a mystery event, because there is potentially scrap data for an AZ's Floette distribution, you could also get it with a signature move, Light of Ruin, which is interesting. Now, okay, so all that aside, we obviously never got the distribution. What we got in Poké Generation 6 was officially, we got the 2 forms of Pavilion. We also eventually, I think in May, we got the distribution of that year. We got the distribution of Shiny Xerneas and Shiny Yveltal. And also, we got a non-shiny version of Zygarde. We'd have to wait till the basically end life cycle of Pokemon Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon before we actually got those Pokemon distributed. But that's besides the point. The fact is, we never got it. And Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, basically being born off the Generation 6 data, basically meant there was no update. It was still in the game, but we still never got an official distribution during the life cycle of Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Then we have the infamous year that we had no Pokemon game between Generation 6 and 7. And this is where everybody and their uncle will ask about, well, what about Pokemon Z version? Pokemon Z version is the most controversial talking point about Pokemon games because it technically should have come out, but did not. Even to the point that the Pokemon anime changed its name from Pokemon X and Y to Pokemon X, Y, and Z. I mean, it's very obvious at one point they were intending on making a Z version, and even in the Pokemon Terra leak, it's proven that yes, there at one point was a thought of making Pokemon Z version. Now, we're not going to get too deep into Game Freak's gear initiative that was going on at the time. In short, this was a period of time where the Pokemon, not the Pokemon Company, but Game Freak, the main developers of Pokemon games, was trying to move on from creating basically just Pokemon games, and they were trying to make, and they're still trying to this day to find an IP that can match Pokemon, so its developers don't get fully burnt out on making Pokemon games. Which I can imagine if you're working on Pokemon games for 20 plus years, you do get a little tired of it. Obviously, this initiative did not go as planned, and unfortunately, Game Freak has never really got an IP as popular, except for that new game coming out on Series X and PlayStation 5. Does look fairly interesting. Shocking that Pokemon can put out that kind of design, but we're not going to get too deep into the burrows there. But to say the least, that it was very interesting to see, that, I mean, the idea that AZ's Floette would have been distributed in a Pokemon Z version is pretty interesting. But hearing about the amount of content that was truly cut from Pokemon X and Y, it really kind of makes a lot of sense why it didn't come out at all. I mean, the idea that we were supposed to get a South Kalos, and it was basically supposed to be a second region within Kalos, but just a southern part is pretty crazy to think about. Like, literally 8 more gym areas. I mean, we really could have just got all the Pokemon catchable within Kalos, but obviously they didn't want to do that at the time. Then we move on to Generation 7. Now, a big Generation 7 thing was the major file size difference between the Generation 6 Pokemon games and Generation 7. While Generation 6 Pokemon games did not fully fill up a 3DS cartridge, a big thing about that at the time was the fact that Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon basically filled up the entire cartridge. And that is because of the new Pokemon models that they were working on. Pokemon was trying at the time to really move the needle forward on their designs. So what they did was they redesigned every Pokemon 3D model they had for Generation 6 and basically made it so they could future-proof all those designs and those skeletons. Basically, all they have to do is if they want to upscale the designs of a Pokemon, all they got to do is just take the old skeleton, upgrade it with some new skins, and boom. The Pokemon model should work from generation to generation, no difference. You don't have to do any extra coding. It's kind of a smart idea. Now, why do I even bring all this up when I'm talking about Generation 7 and AZ's Floette? Well, it's the fact that all the Pokemon who got a model update, it was Floette. AZ's Floette got a model update. It wasn't just the fact that we got a model update, it was the fact that this model update was for a Pokemon who was never distributed in Generation 6. You know, the cosplay Pikachus were victims of not getting these model upgrades, but here we got the AZ's Floette, for some reason, got a model update. And not just that, there was also a slight stat change. The signature move it had, got an update, on top of the fact that it also had a stat update too, making its stats different than that of a regular Floette. More than anything, it seemed like they were finally intending to fully pull the trigger on this. And Generation 7 came and went with no sign of AZ's Floette in any way or capacity. And I have a slight idea why. To anyone who's played Pokemon X and Y, Sun and Moon, you know, and also Omega Ruby and all them, you definitely know there's a thing called battle areas. We have the Battle Mansion within X and Y Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, and then you have the Battle Tree in the post-game area of Pokemon Sun and Moon. Well, my thought process is maybe that's where AZ was supposed to show up and battle us. I really think that maybe a rematch with AZ and XY, the first time appearance in Sun and Moon, Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire, and a post-game area of Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon and Sun and Moon were meant to actually have us battle AZ within these two battle facilities. But obviously he never shows up, so maybe this was just a past thing. Maybe it was just a passing idea that never really got to fruition. At least that's my thought process. We never see AZ's Floette in any official capacity show up, and it kind of makes sense. Now, let's talk about something that maybe does make a bit more sense. And let's talk about when Pokemon games went to the Switch. When Pokemon games finally moved up to the Switch, that should have been the end of it, right? I mean, yes, AZ's Floette could move in the Pokemon Bank, which is another strange thing, and it had a model in Pokemon Bank, and actually, they had Pokedex entries for AZ's Floette. Yeah, AZ's Floette had a different Pokedex entry as well, which is a strange thing, but you know, for Pokemon not distributed, there's sure a lot of supporting data for this thing eventually showing up in a Pokemon game. So, as things go, we never got it. Now, when of course, Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee had nothing to do with AZ's Floette. It was a Kalos game with only 2 new Pokemon, Meltan and Melmetal, and those games are really irrelevant to this conversation. But when Pokemon Sword and Shield was coming around, everyone was excited to see maybe we'll finally get it within Pokemon Sword and Shield. Then, of course, then that Dex cuts. And I don't want to talk about that. If I were to review Pokemon Sword and Shield, I'm going to have to address the National Pokedex cut. And it's going to be annoying. And trust me, Pokemon fans are absolutely the worst at times. I'm just as guilty. But we have to address the fact that Floette never shows up in Pokemon Sword and Shield. So the only way we could ever get it is if maybe somehow it shows up in a, maybe they'll do a distribution in Pokemon Home when it comes out. And yes, Pokemon Home, the storage app, where you can take all your Pokemon from your Switch titles, and you can transfer Pokemon from Pokemon Bank up to Pokemon Home. Well, here's the thing is, Ilka, our beloved developers of Brilliant Diamond Shining Pearl, if you can't tell sarcasm there, they are the ones who are the main developers of Pokemon Home. Well, when Pokemon Home first launched on mobile, well, look who it is. There's a model of AZ's Floette in the game. it shouldn't be there. Like, the Switch edition has no AZ's Floette data in there, and you can't even get the model. But when Pokemon Home launched, there was a model of AZ's Floette in the game. And you could transfer temporarily AZ's Floette into Pokemon. You could actually, for a temporary time, you could actually update, AZ's Floette from Pokemon Bank into Pokemon Home. And then eventually Pokemon Home very quickly got patched and removed this. Any AZ's Floette you had would rather be turned into a bad egg or would revert to its original form, the base form. Meaning that officially any and all connection to, this Floette was done. And then the final nail in the coffin was within the code of Pokemon Sword and Shield. Inside Sword and Shield, now mind you, for fans of Pokemon who don't know this, inside the data of Pokemon, every Pokemon game is technically every single information of a Pokemon, even if they don't show up within those games. For example, Scarlet and Violet may not have, let's think about this for instance, Scarlet and Violet might not have the data for Spinda, but technically Spinda's data is still within Pokemon Scarlet Violet and technically could be called into the game. Now, those would become bad eggs because the data for Spinda is not officially there, but just the code index. Well, within the code data of AZ's within Floette itself, within Pokemon Sword and Shield, they removed the 6 model. So now it goes from Floette being 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5, to now it's just 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, meaning that it was only the original 5 colors of Floette, and officially AZ's Floette is gone. And then we heard nothing for years. AZ's Floette did show up in Scarlet and Violet, but it was just regular Floette. Tiny, fairy, and nothing special. Then we got the announcement of Pokemon Legends ZA, and yeah, we finally know that AZ's Floette is in the game again. But the ultimate question is, will it be obtainable by the player? Or will this little guy just be hanging out with our man AZ at his hotel? That's a great question to ask. Personally, I'm not sure 100%. I would hope that AZ would get to just chill with his Floette forever, and, But at the same time, I do have a little birdie on my shoulder telling me that potentially there is a leak for a mega form of not Floette, but of AZ's Floette. And if that's true, it'd be very strange for a Floette to have a exclusive to a trainer Mega Evolution that we can never obtain. And that's kind of where we have to leave it for now. AZ's Floette is a strange, mysterious Pokemon who has had quite the history behind it. A messed up legacy of almost being obtained and then never ending up in our own hands and never in our own Pokeballs to go on a journey with. Now, the ultimate question that I have to ask is, did you guys ever want AZ's Floette? Or has this just been one of those choices of illusion that we thought we wanted it, but we never got it? My own personal opinion is, give it to me. I want it. I want it now. But, hey, thank you everybody so much for watching. Hey, if you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you want to see more Pokemon content, anime, and maybe some shiny hunting live streams, subscribe. I do a lot of stuff here, and I have a lot of projects in the works. Spoiler, I'm working on a massive video on the Digimon anime, the movie, and all its 3 parts. So if you guys want to join me for that, it'd be awesome if you subscribe. Have a good one. Geek out.